All right. Well, welcome to Ministries. We are going to be reading Parasha 26 today, and I'm really looking forward to it. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be in Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1, and we're going to read all the way through chapter 11, verse 47. So let's begin with that and go from there. All right, let's get started. On the 8th day, Moshe called Aaron and his sons and the leaders of Israel and said to Aaron, "Take a male calf for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, both without defect, and offer them before Adonai. Then tell the people of Israel, take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both a year old and without defect, for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for peace offerings, to sacrifice before Adonai. Also a grain offering mixed with olive oil, because today Adonai is going to appear to you." They brought what Moshe had ordered before the tent of meeting, and the whole community approached and stood before Adonai. Moshe said, "This is what Adonai has ordered you to do, so that the glory of Adonai will appear to you." Moshe told Aaron, "Approach the altar, offer your sin offering and burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and the people. Then present the offering of the people and make atonement for them, as Adonai ordered." So Aaron approached the altar and slaughtered the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. The sons of Aaron presented the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar. Then he poured out the blood at the base of the altar. But the fat, the kidneys, and the covering of the liver of the sin offering he made go up in smoke on the altar, as Adonai had ordered Moshe. The meat and the skin were burned up completely outside the camp. Next, he slaughtered the burnt offering. Aaron's sons brought him the blood, and he splashed it against all sides of the altar. They brought him the burnt offering, piece by piece, and the head, and he made them go up in smoke on the altar. He washed the inner organs and the lower parts of the legs, and made them go up in smoke on the top of the burnt offering on the altar. Then the people's offering was presented. He took the goat of the sin offering, which was for the people, slaughtered it, and offered it for sin, like the earlier sin offering. The burnt offering was presented, and he offered it in the prescribed manner. The grain offering was presented. He took a handful of it and made it go up in smoke on the altar, in addition to the morning's burnt offering. He slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's sacrifice of peace offerings. Aaron's son brought him the blood, and he splashed against all sides of the altar. And the fat of the ox and of the ram, the fat tail and the fat which covers the inner organs, the kidneys and the covering of the liver, they put the fat on the breasts, and he made the fat go up in smoke on the altar. The breasts and the right thigh Aaron waved as a wave offering before Adonai, as Moshe had ordered. Aaron raised his hands toward the people and blessed them, and came down from offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings. Moshe and Aaron entered the tent of meeting, came out, and blessed the people. Then the glory of Adonai appeared to all the people. Fire came forth from the presence of Adonai, consuming the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. But Nadab and Avihu, sons of Aaron, each took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire before Adonai, something he had not ordered them to do. At this, fire came forth from the presence of Adonai and consumed them, so that they died in the presence of Adonai. And Moshe said to Aaron, "This is what Adonai said, through those who are near me I will be consecrated, and before all the people I will be glorified." Aaron kept silent. Moshe called Mishael and Letzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, Aaron's uncle, and told them, "Come here and carry your cousins away from in front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp. They approached and carried them in their tunics out of the camp, as Moshe had said. Then Moshe told Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Don't unbind your hair or tear your clothes in mourning, so that you won't die, and so that Adonai won't be angry with the entire community. Rather, let your kinsmen and the whole house of Israel mourn because of the destruction Adonai brought about with his fire. Moreover, don't leave the entrance to the tent of meeting, or you will die, because Adonai's anointing oil is on you." Adonai said to Aaron, "Don't drink any wine or other intoxicating liquor, neither you nor your sons with you, when you enter the tent of meeting, so that you will not die. This is to be a permanent regulation through all your generations, so that you will distinguish between holy and the common, and between unclean and the clean, and so that you will teach the people of Israel all the laws Adonai has told them through Moshe." Moshe said to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his remaining sons, "Take the grain offering left from the offerings for Adonai made by fire, and leave it without leaven next to the altar, because it is especially holy. Eat it in a holy place, because it is your and your sons' share of the offerings for Adonai made by fire. For this is what I have been ordered. The breast that is waved and the thigh that was raised you are to eat in a clean place, you, your sons, and your daughters with you. For these are given as you and your children's share of the sacrifices of the peace offerings presented by the people of Israel. They are to bring the raised thigh and the waved breast, along with the offerings of fat made by fire, and wave it as a wave offering before Adonai. Then it will belong to you and your descendants with you as your perpetual share, as Adonai has ordered." Then Moshe carefully investigated what had happened to the goat of the sin offering and discovered that it had been burned up. He became angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the remaining sons of Aaron, and asked, "Why didn't you eat the sin offering in the area of the sanctuary, since it is especially holy? He gave it to you to take away the guilt of the community, to make atonement for them before Adonai. Look, its blood wasn't brought into the sanctuary. You should have eaten it there in the sanctuary, as I ordered." Aaron answered Moshe, "Even though they offered their sin offering and burnt offering today, things like these have happened to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would it have pleased Adonai?" On hearing his reply, Moshe was satisfied. Adonai said to Moshe and Aaron, "Tell the people of Israel, these are the living creatures which you may eat among all the land animals. Any that has a separate hoof, which is completely divided and chews the cud, these animals you may eat. But you are not to eat those that only chew the cud, or only have a separate hoof. For example, the camel, the coney, and the hare are unclean for you, because they chew the cud, but don't have a separate hoof. While the pig is unclean for you, because although it has a separate and completely divided hoof, it doesn't chew the cud. You are not to eat meat from these or touch their carcasses. They are unclean for you. Of all the things that live in the water, you may eat these. Anything in the water that has fins and scales, whether in seas or in rivers, these you may eat. But everything in the seas and rivers, both without fins and scales, of all the small water creatures and of all the living creatures in the water, it is a detestable thing for you. These will be detestable for you. You are not to eat their meat, and you are to detest their carcasses. Whatever lacks fins and scales in the water is a detestable thing for you. The following creatures of the air are to be detestable for you. They are not to be eaten. They are a detestable thing: the eagle, the vulture, the osprey, the kite, the various kinds of buzzards, the various kinds of ravens, the ostrich, the screech owl, the seagull, the various kinds of hawks, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the horned owl, the pelican, the barn owl, the stork, the various kinds of herons, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged swarming creatures that go on all fours are a detestable thing for you, except that of all winged swarming creatures that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, enabling them to jump off the ground. Specifically, of these ye may eat the various kinds of locusts, grasshoppers, katydids, and crickets. But other than that, all winged swarming creatures having 4 feet are a detestable thing for you. The following will make you unclean. Whoever touches the carcasses of them will be unclean unto even. And whoever picks up any part of their carcasses is to wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Every animal that has a separate but incompletely divided hoof, or that doesn't chew the cud, is unclean for you. Anyone who touches them will become unclean. Whatever goes on its paws among all animals that go on all fours is unclean for you. Whoever touches its carcass will be unclean unto evening. Whoever picks up its carcass is to wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. These are unclean for you. The following are unclean for you among all the small creatures that swarm on the ground: the weasel, the mouse, the various kinds of lizards, the gecko, the land crocodile, the skink, the land lizard, and the chameleon. They are unclean, crawling creatures. Whoever touches them when they are dead will be unclean until evening. Anything on which one of them falls when dead will become unclean. Wooden utensils, article of clothing, leather, sacking, any utensil used for work. It must be put in water. It will be unclean until evening. Then it will be clean. If one of them falls into a clay pot, whatever is in it will become unclean, and ye are to break the pot. Any food permitted to be eaten that water from such a vessel gets on will become unclean. Any permitted liquid in such a vessel will become unclean. Everything on which any carcass part of theirs falls will become unclean, whether oven or stove, is to be broken in pieces. They are unclean and will be unclean for you. Although a spring or cistern for collecting water remains clean, but anyone who touches one of their carcasses will become unclean. If any carcass part of theirs falls on any kind of seed to be sown, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and a carcass parts of theirs falls on it, it is unclean for you. If any animal of a kind that you are permitted to eat dies, whoever touches its carcass will be unclean until evening. A person who eats meat from its carcass or carries its carcass is to wash his clothes. He will be unclean until evening. Any creature that swarms on the ground is a detestable thing. It is not to be eaten. Whatever moves on its stomach, goes on all fours, or has many legs. All creatures that swarm on the ground, you are not to eat them, because they are a detestable thing. You are not to make yourselves detestable with any of these swarming, crawling creatures. Do not make yourselves unclean with them. Do not defile yourselves with them. For I am Adonai your God. Therefore consecrate yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. And do not defile yourselves with any kind of swarming creature that moves along the ground. For I am Adonai who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Therefore you are to be holy, because I am holy. Such, then, is the law concerning animals, flying creatures, all living creatures that move about in the water, and all creatures that swarm on the ground. Its purpose is to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the creatures that may be eaten and those that may not be eaten. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears to the Haftarah. That is going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 1 through, we're going to read all the way through chapter 7, verse 17. All right, let's go to that. All right, let's begin. And David summoned all the picked troops of Israel, 30,000 men. Then David, taking along the entire force he had with him then, set out for Baal Yehuda. bring up from there the ark of God, which bears the name of Adonai Tsevaot, enthroned above the Kivarim. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Avinadab on the hill, with Uzzah and Achio, the sons of Avinadab, driving the new cart. They led it from the house of Avinadab on the hill with the ark of God. Achio walked in front of the ark. David and the whole house of Israel celebrated in the presence of Adonai with all kinds of musical instruments made of cypress wood, including lyres, lutes, tambourines, rattles, and cymbals. When they arrived at Nachon's threshing floor, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah put out his hand to steady the ark of God. But Adonai's anger blazed up against Uzzah, and God struck him down on the spot for his offense, so that he died there by the ark of God. It upset David that Adonai had broken out against Uzzah. That place has been called Peretz Uzzah ever since. David was frightened before Adonai that day. He asked, "How can the ark of Adonai come to me?" So David would not bring the ark of Adonai into the city of David. Rather, David took it over to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of Adonai stayed in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months, and Adonai blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. King David was told, "Adonai has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and everyone who belongs to him, thanks to the ark of God." So David went and joyously brought the ark of God up from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David. When those bearing the ark of Adonai had gone only 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatted sheep. Then David danced and spun around with abandon before Adonai, wearing a linen ritual vest. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark with shouting and with the sound of the shofar. As the ark of Adonai entered the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Shaul, watching from the window, saw King David leaping and spinning before Adonai, and she was filled with contempt for him. They brought the ark of Adonai in and put it in its place inside the tent that David had set up for it. David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before Adonai. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of Adonai Tsevaot. Then he distributed to all the people of Israel, to everyone there, both men and women, a loaf of bread, a portion of meat, and a raisin cake, after which the people all left for their homes. When David returned to bless his household, Michal, the daughter of Shaul, came out to meet him and said, "Such honor the king of Israel earned for himself today, exposing himself before his servants, slave girls, like some vulgar exhibitionist." David answered Michal, "In the presence of Adonai, who chose me over your father and over everyone in his family to make me chief over Adonai's people, over Israel, I will celebrate in the presence of Adonai. I will make myself still more contemptible than that, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But those slave girls you mentioned will honor me." Michal, the daughter of Shaul, remained childless until the day she died. After the king had been living in his palace a while, and Adonai had given him rest from all his surrounding enemies, the king said to Natan the prophet, "Here, I'm living in a cedar wood palace, but the ark of God is kept in a tent." Natan said to the king, "Go, do everything that is in your heart, for Adonai is with you." But that same night the word of Adonai came to Natan. "Go and tell my servant David that this is what Adonai says. You are going to build me a house. You are going to build me a house to live in? Since the day I brought the people of Israel out of Egypt until today, I never lived in a house. Rather, I traveled in a tent and a tabernacle. Everywhere I traveled with all the people of Israel, did I ever speak a word to any of the tribes of Israel, whom I ordered to shepherd my people Israel, asking, 'Why haven't you built me a cedar wood house?' Therefore, say to this my servant David that this is what Adonai Tsevaot says. I took you from the sheepyards, from following the sheep, to make you chief over my people, over Israel. I have been with you wherever you went. I have destroyed all your enemies ahead of you, and I am making your reputation great, like the reputations of the greatest people on earth. I will assign a place to my people Israel. I will plant them there, so that they can live in their own place without being disturbed anymore. The wicked will no longer oppress them, as they did at the beginning, and as they did from the time I ordered judges to be over my people Israel. Instead, I will give you rest from all your enemies. Moreover, Adonai tells you that Adonai will make you a house. When your days come to an end and you sleep with your ancestors, I will establish one of your descendants to succeed you, one of your own flesh and blood, and I will set up his rulership. He will build a house for my name, and I will establish his royal throne forever. I will be a father for him, and he will be a son for me. If he does something wrong, I will punish him with a rod and blows, just as everyone gets punished. Nevertheless, my grace will not leave him, as I took it away from Shaul, whom I removed from before you. Thus your house and your kingdom will be made secure forever before you. Your throne will be set up forever. Natan told David all of these words and described this entire vision. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to Charlesette Ministries read through the Torah portions. You guys have a wonderful Shabbat. See you guys next time.